Day 312 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. And as always, I'll start off with those Russian military losses. So for the first day of 2023, the first of the first, so in the last 24-hour reporting period, there's been 106,720 Russian military personnel losses, which represents an additional 760 for the day. Also, for Russian hardware losses, there's been 1 tank, 9 ACVs, and 5 artillery losses on the Russian side, but also 46 UAVs and 12 cruise missiles, which I'll explain shortly. So we'll move back to the map now, where Russia launched more than 20 air and land-based cruise missiles and about 50 drones in the past 24 hours as part of its attempt to kill the Ukrainian spirit. And that almost sounds made up, but Russia said it themselves, saying they're targeting the country's infrastructure, so Ukraine's infrastructure, to make Ukraine overthrow their own leadership and become one with Russia instead. A country which probably has one of the most atrocious civil rights abuses levels of any modern nation. Notice I didn't call Russia a first world nation. Yep, sorry Russia, you can't be a first world country if 20% of your population still don't have indoor plumbing. 1 in 5, gee. But I digress. So of those 20 missiles and 50 Russian drone strikes, 12 missiles and 46 were neutralized by Ukrainian air defenses. But I've got to say, in a bit of a dick move by Russia, one of the Iranian-made drones, the tail end, debris, had the inscription Happy New Year on it. Then we'll move across to the Kyiv, or the capital, Kyiv here, of the country. So in the capital and its surrounding areas was one such location that got hit hard in the last day. Now I want to quickly add in here that Russia normally hits Ukraine at the start of the week, on a Monday or a Tuesday, to inflict the maximum amount of economic damage that they can, but not this time. Instead, it was clearly designed to depress or demoralize the Ukrainian people as they were just celebrating the new year. But missile strikes, we've seen, can't break the Ukrainian fighting spirit. It only strengthens it. And Russia started pretty early in its attacks this morning as well. By about 2:10 a.m. They commenced them. Then by about 4:30 a.m. already at that point, 43 of 46 drones sent Ukraine's way were already shot down. And that there is just a photo of the early morning debris that followed. And also, there was one such piece of Ukrainian infrastructure that got hit pretty hard. The Alpha Vito Hotel, not far from downtown Kyiv. Now, of course, I'm kidding when I say this is electrical or water infrastructure or whatever the case for the city. In other words, clearly not a military target. Then we'll move across on the map to the Donbass. So Ukrainian defenders are effectively holding positions around Bakhmut, for instance there. So that's in the central Donbass, really obviously at the front line, if you've been keeping up with any of this. So even today, Russian forces yet again launched new assaults, but were unable to make a breakthrough. But to provide some further context here, Russian elite brigades have taken massive losses in months of heavy combat on the front lines, just like here at Bakhmut. In fact, especially here at Bakhmut. So the infamous Spetsnaz, who is, or supposedly is, the special forces units of Russia, continues to be thrown into untenable positions and unachievable missions. So the Spetsnaz regiment are mostly rendered combat ineffective due to massive losses. Not to mention all of the losses from the skilled military personnel from there too. Which will probably all remind you of a line from the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine saying, "We finished up with the Russian professional army, now it's time to defeat the unprofessional army." Then we'll move across on the map to Zaporizhia next up, where, just like any other day, Tokmak has been hit again. So it continues to be hit by Ukrainian precision strikes, Now there's airfields, bases, and ammunition depots here of the Russian variant. You see, the Russian army uses something called a push system for their military tactical logistics, as opposed to the NATO pull system. In other words, Russian forces or Russian logisticians have determined brigade consumption rates for combat. And we're not just talking about combat for hardware, but also we're talking about people too. So basically, just consider it like a steady flow of arms and personnel to positions near the front line. And this is in part why we get a lot of Russian ammunition depots exploding. You could even say it's all literally pushed up to the front. Now, the NATO system, the pull system, however, you could consider or say it's more communication intensive, and supplies are called in as needed. Now, that's a bit of a simplified breakdown, but that's the premise of this channel mostly anyway. Although I've certainly caught myself a few times noticing in post-production that I've done or gone on some technical tangents. Then next, also in the Zaporizhia Oblast, on the Ukrainian-held side. Now, due to the missile strikes and the drone strikes in the last 24 hours, it left 1,750 homes without power following that New Year's attack. And really not to be left out, unfortunately, Kherson, so the recently liberated side here. The Russian army shelled Kherson overnight. There was damage to residential houses and a children's hospital as well. Fortunately, no kids were harmed in that attack. Then we'll move down to the adjacent Russian-occupied Crimean Peninsula, where the explosions reported in Jankoy from yesterday were actually from the Jankoy airport, which you can see there with the little airport signal indication image. Now, specifically, this is a military airbase, so I doubt it was partisan related, as I'm sure this place would be locked down to civilians in the region. But instead, a drone attack from Ukraine, for instance, could have been the case there. Either way, though, it's certainly keeping Russian forces on their toes in this region. So, for a location that's out of range from land-based HIMARS attacks, for instance, Ukraine still have the capability to reach it. And we don't really need a crystal ball to know that Ukraine's strike range capabilities will only increase in this year of 2023. That is for darn certain. Then we'll move across, lastly in this case, to some of the happenings in Russia. For instance, to begin with, there was a transformer explosion at the Rostov power station, just next to the Donbass there. But not just there were explosions at other Russian oblasts today, many in the north, such as Belgorod, Kursk, Voronezh, and even air alarms went off in St. Petersburg, which is really quite far away. Let's just put that to a calculation somewhere approximately on the front line, and we'll go to St. Petersburg, about 1,000 kilometers, roughly 650 or so miles. So like I said before, Russia is really being kept on their toes, although I guess a better expression might be something like they're really, metaphorically speaking, really watching over their shoulders. Well, actually, maybe not so metaphorically sometimes. But then specifically in the Russian Volgograd Oblast, an explosion occurred, so that's right here, an explosion occurred due to a Russian missile launch misfire or malfunction, or what I like to sometimes call it a fizzle out or a boomerang. So in other words, Russia literally hurting themselves. Ukraine not required. But to add to that, it wasn't even just one, it was several Russian missile launch malfunctions. And I'm really hoping to get more information on that soon. Then we'll move across to some news for the day. So, amid the New Year's Eve and early New Year's morning Russian strikes on Ukraine, Ukrainian President Zelensky delivered an address saying, quote, "It was our year, the year of Ukraine, the year of the Ukrainians." He then went on to say, "We are all one family, one Ukraine." And he did really say a lot, but regarding some of the highlights, he also said, quote, "This is the year when Ukraine changed the world, and the world discovered Ukraine. We were told to surrender. We chose a counterattack. We were told to make concessions and compromises. We are joining the European Union and NATO. I am here. We are here. You are here. Everyone is here. We are all Ukraine. So, gee, the guy can spin some motivational lines better than my country's leader can. Then in some other news, 140 Ukrainian prisoners were freed from Russian captivity just in time for New Year's. So some of these were wounded soldiers originally that were defending Mariupol, as well as some Snake Island soldiers as well. It was all part of a one-for-one prisoner exchange deal with Russia that happens from time to time. So even though Russia and Ukraine aren't really directly talking, there are some diplomatic channels open for this because it always benefits both sides, obviously. Then in another Russian military mobilization blunder, I might call this one Don't Leave Home. So lots of Russian residents in Russian capital cities have been very confused in understanding what's happening with Russian men constantly being taken off the streets recently. So even with a partial mobilization, Russia has still been extremely short on cannon fodder. And I have to quickly add here, the very nature of cannon fodder troops means that more are constantly needed. So this is what forced mobilization looks like in Russia. Riot police picking up men from the streets. Wives are obviously pretty distraught over it in some of the footage, you'll see that. And this is by no means an isolated event. They were getting picked up in many places. We're even talking about some of the major capital cities, including Moscow and St. Petersburg as well, surprisingly. So sometimes riot police pick up these guys off the street for the slightest of infractions or none at all. And previous stories I've seen is that after they're picked up off the streets, literally, they're blackmailed into two choices as part of some Russian coercive tactics. So first choice, jail time because of a trumped up charge of citizens holding contraband of some description, or second choice, go to war. But the joke's on everybody here, obviously, because going to jail in Russia now pretty much means you are going to war. And there's actually a word for this when you're offered two choices, but really only one thing is actually being offered. It's called Hobson's choice. And for this sort of stuff, I've actually shown some specific examples in previous videos about these two choices, or should I say the Hobson's choice, which is what happens directly after they reach the police station shortly, really just right after. Then in a funny to round it off, and I guess this is funny, so this one is floating around the internet a bit. So Putin and his politics continues to be one big show. In this photo, Putin is performing a greeting for the new year with soldiers somewhere close to the Ukrainian border. I believe this one was taken in the Rostov Oblast, right next to the Donbass. So, as far as we know, Putin has not actually set foot in the Donbass or anywhere in Ukraine for that matter. But I'm really looking forward to the day that he does, because that will be quite the inspirational source of memes, I am sure. Anyway, with these photos, Putin gets called out as a fake when they spot the same person or actor in completely different photos. So I've seen this one before, I've seen her before. Sometimes she's part of a fishing family or part of a church parish, but today, she's a soldier. But perhaps I shouldn't be too quick to judge. Perhaps she's all of these things. Because, sometimes the multitasking capability of women can sometimes be second to none. And just a last final funny, because that one didn't really necessarily float my boat, and I wasn't sure about you guys too. So this is a really quick one, more of a lighter side of news in a way. But we have here in this footage Santa flying a Ukrainian MiG-29 equipped with presents such as the AGM-88s and the R-73s, all put in there with a woolly beard to suit. So thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button. Again, thanks for all of your support. Really can't do it without you guys at this point. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.